and still has needs. They forget that as tired as she is and exhausted as she is and so preoccupied, and this is no flaw of hers, it's just what happens when you become a mum, she naturally can forget that he needs a bit of attention, he needs a bit of love, he needs a bit of affection. And in her attempt to become a mother, and a fantastic mother, she can often neglect her duties as a wife. So what happens is he doesn't want to say, oh, by the way, can you stop looking after the kids and come back to me? So he might outsource it. How I recommend you navigate that is just and it's so difficult for women, but if you can make quality time to ask more open-ended questions to your partner, it makes a world of a difference. Rather than just, what time are you coming? Can you pick up the kids? Can you do this? It's like, how are you feeling? Is everything okay? What's stressing you out? You haven't been yourself. You stay attuned to your partner, they're less likely to stray. Doesn't mean they won't 100%, and doesn't mean you're responsible, but they're less likely to stray. So it isn't personal, but what it is a reflection of is the communication has broken down in some way, shape or form. And is finding a time to reconnect will prevent that from getting to an affair.
Whew. Hey guys, welcome to Little Blackbird 91. We're back with another one of those conversations. It's the men's talk once more. Again, we're on episode 6 of this fabulous, wonderful conversations that myself and Jay are having. Today, we're talking about men and their needs. Men and their needs. Now, you watched that video and I probably were thinking a lot of thoughts. I'm sure if you're a lady too watching it, you're probably thinking to yourself, damn, do we ever get a break? You know what I'm saying? Do we get thought about ourselves? And I totally hear you. I totally hear you. But it's not about you. Okay, so I'm going to need you to park your bus, okay, get your pen and your paper ready, and get ready to have this conversation. And, of course, we always try to keep this conversation balanced because we like to give both sides. This is not about bashing women. But this really is about helping both men and women. And I think that video really encapsulated something that does happen a lot to men, which is that you can't compete with your child. You just can't, right? You can't compete with your child. I mean, I've never been in that situation myself, but I can imagine you can't compete with your child. But the problem is the same problem that exists in relationships all the way through, whether it's a child, whether it's a relationship in general. There is a time and period. There's a period in time where in relationships, people do have their eye on other things and may forget to put your needs first. And you may feel like you are by the wayside or you are second priority. What you're supposed to do in those moments? What do you do as a man when you feel like your missus or your wife or your partner is not making you a priority? Do you go out there and cheat? Because I don't advocate for that. So there must be a solution to this, because the core crux problem is that your needs are not being met. Your wants are not being met. You feel like you are second priority right now. Before you think about going out there into them streets and doing something that you can't take back, this is a conversation you need to pay attention to, because we're going to help you navigate this field. And I believe by the end of this conversation, we'll help you how to have a conversation with your partner as well, how to be brave and courageous in those moments, and actually share vulnerability, how you actually feel and what you actually want from your partner. Silence is not going to help anybody in this situation, okay? And there's never actually a good time to address certain issues. So let's just be honest about that. But again, I'm not doing this by myself. I am with my wonderful co-host, who's also smart, intelligent, handsome, as well. Looks good. I'm telling you, smells good too. You know what I'm saying to you? All right? That's a brother in Christ in there, perfumed and fragranced with the Lord. You know what I'm saying to you? Don't play with it now. But welcome, Jay. How you doing, Captain, bro? Sorry, bro. Go for it.
So, bro, I'm all right, man. It's been a good day. I'm happy. As you know, I guess this is timely because what I spoke about today with my workplace, this is perfect. But as always, man, I'm happy to be here, happy to be part of this series. Me and Coach, we have numerous conversations, and we go deep. We really go deep. And yeah, this is another area that we're passionate about, just allowing men and women to really come together and have a more healthier conversation.
Thank you, Jay. When you obviously, because I want to put it to you first, because obviously you have a child, so you will be able to give a full perspective straight away in terms of what that actually looks like, right? So when you watch that video, I know that obviously you kind of mentioned a little bit, obviously, like it hit home. So tell us a little bit about why you said it hits home, and what things were familiar to you in that particular sense.
So I've got 2 kids, right? The first one, he wasn't married. He was co-parenting from the beginning. So although I understood the dynamic, it wasn't in the way that our lady is saying in the video. it wasn't until I was married over a decade later, that's where I saw what was going on. And how she described it was to a T. Now, to caveat it, well, in addressing this, we're not addressing men who already have emotional issues, who already have issues with discipline. We're trying to have a more of a mature conversation, because certain things still do happen. And what I noticed in my marriage was that she was pouring so much into our daughter that there was nothing left for me. And I also noticed she was pouring into our daughter because she couldn't pour into me in the way that a woman or a wife is supposed to. I'm not saying I'm not pouring into her. I'm saying there's a two-parter here. We both have a job to do. And what I felt in that moment, and I did address it, by the way, I did say to her, she was shocked that I was even able to identify it. Didn't change anything. But in that moment, I realized why certain men, do decide to look the other way, or do allow those moments to become toxic in their marriage. So, so that was my personal, experience. I really do understand it. And I guess I can say this now. Today I spoke to around 127 people in the firm that I work for about fatherhood. And this was a topic that I identified where couples stop communicating and pour themselves into work or into their children because they don't want to identify the problems that actually are happening in their marriage. I notice this a lot when I watch Wife Swap, which all of you globally are familiar with. In the UK, we have something called Rich House, Poor House as well, where rich families and poor families swap. And what I normally see, especially with those who are wealthy, this is exactly the trap that they fall under. So believe me, it is so easy to focus on everything else except your partner and feel justified in doing so. I'm sure in the comments, some ladies are going to say some men are babies, some men are this, some men are that. That could be the case. Some men are going to be like that. But to have it from a mature point of view, what we cannot do, especially for a long period of time, is forget that we need to continuously pour into our marriage. We need to continuously make time for each other. One of the things that I liked that my ex-wife did, she made sure that our daughter was in bed by, after a few months, you gotta wean them in, but she was in bed by 6, 7 o'clock. So we always had that evening time to do whatever we wanted and spend that time, even if the rest of the day was a sacrifice. So that's my experience.
I love that. And I love the fact that you expanded it also to work and everything as well, because I think this is about this is about input, right? And it's about where you're pouring yourself into. And as you was talking, I was just listening. I was just thinking to myself, okay, I don't have any children, but I do recall moments where you've been a partner and the partner's focus is elsewhere. And so they're pouring a lot of effort into other things, right? For instance, they might be pouring a lot of effort into their business. Maybe maybe they've just started a new business, right? That's their new baby, as you want to call it, right? They've got a new business, or they're focused on becoming an aunt or an uncle or something like that. Do you know what I mean? There's a new, becoming a new member of the family, or there's a new project that's going on. There's something that's taking their eye off the ball and it's making them focus elsewhere. And as I was thinking about it, I was like, okay. What happens to the man when those situations happen is that, again, a lot of us, if we're not conscious and aware and of what's going on within ourselves, our natural inclination is to source it outside rather than actually looking within to ask ourselves, what do I actually need? It's often what you hear from men when they cheat. They're like, she treated me like a king, and what you're really saying is, she poured into me. You know what I mean? It's why women get confused when men cheat with really women that are not that prettiest, and they're like, how can you cheat with that ugly girl? Well, because that girl was catering, baby. Okay. All right. She ain't got a candle to a flame to you, but she was catering. And so what she was doing was inputting. So as a man specifically, putting it back on myself, you need to really understand what's going on within you. You have to take a breather, don't act too hastily, and actually really consider what's actually going on with you. And once you can get to that place, then we're going to have to look to communicate. Now, what I do understand is that in the midst of when someone takes that out of the ball, what's really happening is, like you said a powerful word, is that the person, sometimes what can happen in these situations is that women can look at a situation in a particular way where their focus is on something else because they believe that's the first priority. But really and truly, what it actually is a boundary issue. It's a time boundary issue, meaning that because we're not allocating appropriate time for particular tasks, we run out of time for other things. So something has to be sacrificed. And so then, unfortunately, you can become a casualty of war, because one thing it is that she doesn't want to be called a bad mum. She doesn't want to be called, maybe a bad family member, or doesn't want to get fired from work. So she's thinking about those things, right? And so you become a casualty of that time management issue. And so a lot of times it's actually a boundary issue. People I don't have enough time in a day, they might tell you. I don't have enough time in a day. And you have to also be aware, and I think we can talk about this a little bit later, is that as you are going to discuss this, you may encounter a barrier. You may encounter somebody saying, well, it's because of because you don't do and what you have to understand is the person is feeling attacked in that moment. Don't take it personally, right? But that's one of the hardest things. I don't know if you want to jump on that, Jay.
It is. It's something that I spoke about today as well. But originally was something I said to one of my good friends years ago, just what that dynamic causes, because naturally both people may be frustrated. Naturally, both people may not be being all the way honest about how they feel, because communication is key, but it's not easy. And it's not easy in this type of situation where, you want that person to give that time, and you may not even understand how you're feeling. And what is likely to happen is the argument, is the beef, is the problems, is, the amplification of negativity, even though it's not really going to help. So what I was saying today is give each other grace. And just like you're saying, Coach, when it comes to the guys, there is a lot of guys who use this as a time to emotionally or to physically cheat. Just because you spend a bit in fact, what we will do on this topic is make sure we always say we're not advocating for that type of behavior. We're not advocating for men who are babies, who want to be treated like babies, who have their own emotional issues. This is not what we're advocating for. We're advocating for mature relationships that still go through these things and still have consequences effectively because of neglect. And like Cole is saying, this doesn't have to be a child. It could be work. It could be a man throwing himself into work. It could be one of you always spending time with family, for example, never really giving each other, what you need, not having that pillow talk. So this is something that really, it's a bigger problem than what people realize, and it will be trivialized. That's the issue that I have. It will be trivialized until you're in this situation. And depending on what your priority is going to dictate what your perspective is. The right perspective, which, those of you who go through premarital counseling or counseling after the fact, this is the conversations you're going to have. A lot of couples bring themselves into problems because they spend too much time catering towards the kids and not understand they need to make sure their marriage or their relationship is, because it's 2024, is as healthy as possible in order to give back to the children. And that's it there, bro. I'll leave it there, bro.
Yeah, I mean, and just following on from that, I think also that what that is about being able to juggle priorities, right? So and the funny thing is, this actually starts before you have kids. So let me give an example, right? So let's say you start dating somebody. In that immediate space, what you need to be in is, in that immediate space, you need to be able to learn how to hold. For instance, when I say put myself first, right? Put yourself first does not mean completely ignore the other person's needs and always put yourself first. What it means is that when I have needs, I'm able to bring that up and I'm able to address that so I can get my needs met, right? So I put myself first. But it doesn't mean that I don't put you first to serve you. It doesn't mean I don't have you on the forefront. It doesn't mean that I'm not taking care of you. It doesn't mean that I'm not, like I said, I'm not making you a priority. Right? So I have to juggle that because there is context in terms of when do I make myself first and when do I put my partner first. And so until you understand the context of your relationship and understand what role you play, it can be very difficult. So when I say put myself first or put yourself first, it actually means that first and foremost, yes, you do have to put yourself first. You have to ring fence yourself a little bit, have good boundaries, know what your needs and your wants are, and know your limitations, right? Because it starts from there. And then when I can do that, I can also then be like, okay, cool, you've got needs as well, right? You want me to do X, Y, and Z. Well, okay, I can meet those needs. Or maybe I need to negotiate. And actually, I can't meet all those needs. Or maybe I can't meet all those needs in the time slot that you need it to be met in. So we may need to negotiate. This happens when you're single, when you're in a relationship. But first and foremost, it starts with self. You need to make sure you have good boundaries and are able to hold those boundaries. Then when you get into a relationship, you negotiate and juggle those priorities. Then when you do have kids, there's another juggling, because now when we say, obviously, like you said, your marriage is most important, we're not saying neglect your child. You know what I'm saying to you, right? Like some people, and the problem is that we have people that will literally will either neglect the child or they'll neglect their partner. Which one of the two has to go first? And it's like you got to learn how to juggle, okay, the priorities, okay, and understand what that means contextually. When I put my child first, what it means is, yes, I'm going to make sure my child eats, make sure they're well fed. I'm going to be emotionally present. I'm going to make sure they're good. But like you said, this is what you did. You said by 7, by 8, or whatever, you gotta go to bed, because mommy and daddy got to have mommy and daddy time. Okay, all right. We may book holidays, and maybe this time you're not coming. You're gonna be with grandma. You know, because mommy and daddy need some time. Okay, that's what we mean by prioritizing the relationship. We find solutions that make sure that we are still prioritizing each other's needs. Because that video was showing it, saying, because what can happen, like you said, it's a trivialization of someone's needs, right? Especially from the man's perspective, which is, okay, she becomes a fresh new mother, and you hear these stories of women saying that men are inconsiderate because maybe, for instance, he wants sex. How you gonna want sex after she just had a baby? Da, 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 da. And I totally hear it, right? But the immediate spouting of how can you ask is where we're gonna have an issue, because I'm going to ask because I have needs. So you have every right to say no, and you have every right to say maybe not right now. You have every right to say those things, but I also have every right to ask. Now, of course, we wanna be within reason, of course. But again, this is why trivialization can't happen. We have to build a safe space that we can have any kind of conversation, even ones that are very scary. There are some scary conversations that you might want to have about. There's, outside of needs, there's some scary conversations about maybe what you're feeling that can really shake you to the core, but you need to have the open space. Otherwise, if you don't, it gets contained within somebody and potentially they can act on it. So it's better to have it in the open. But that's about being able to be comfortable in uncomfortable situations as well. So, so that's the whole point. So again, like I said, it is about being able to juggle those priorities as well.
And that's amazing, bro. Like, thank you for that, because prior communication is so key. It's 2024. My opinion is no one has an excuse to be ignorant of the things that happen or occur now. There's too much online. Friends and families have been through too much. Some of us have been through too much. We should be confident enough to, as long as you've made the right choice, but we should be confident enough to have that conversation with our spouse. What is it going to look like? Because as you're going through it, the conversations that you've had beforehand should come to life. I mean, we talked about sex. Okay. The usual time frame is 6 weeks. There are some women who want to do it in 4. There's some women who take a bit longer, who haven't even had something like a cesarean or a tear or anything like that. But if that has occurred, you need to be understanding as a man. Another aspect is postpartum. There's still, unfortunately, a lot of men who don't fully understand what that does in a woman's body, what that creates, or hormones, everything else. So communication both ways should be addressing this step by step. And again, to me, this is where a lot of people go wrong, because it's almost like they put their needs before the communication. So they're not really communicating their needs. They just say, this is what I want, the person not doing it, but eliminate the communication. But when they eventually do communicate, it's never going to be in a constructive way. And now you have to almost walk back to the beginning. And that time frame, especially for a woman, can be traumatizing. She might not feel comfortable to feel like, I want to have another child with this person. And if I'm also being honest, and it just reminds me of my situation, there was a period of time where the thought of having another child and going through what we went through in that time frame, it gave me anxiety. Even as a man, I can say this, it gave me anxiety, because I didn't like what occurred in that time before it became better. I hated it, in fact, even though I did try to understand. The next thing I'll say is, sometimes no matter what you do, it's just time. It's just time. And you need to be okay with things not being exactly how you want it to be for a few months. That's really it. Sometimes even, say if it's a newborn, the child being in the in the same room can be, it can harm, sometimes your conversations, sometimes your sex life, etc., because you have to tend to the child. Sometimes you don't even feel comfortable doing all that with a child there. But you have to be able to be comfortable with things happening for a period of time until they're able to become different. For example, in that period of time, our daughter, I think at 7, 8 months, that's when we put her into her own room. Before then, she was, with us. And even then, I would probably sometimes still get up out of the bed if she was crying, if she woke up, and go and bring her to our bed. So these are things that we all have to deal with. And it needs a mature lens to be able to deal with these things emotionally successfully. Sometimes the lady's not going to feel like you're doing enough and she feels like she has to do everything, and that's going to be her focus. Sometimes the man might feel maybe she's doing too much and he doesn't like that's what's happening. What I will say to guys is to, especially if you do want sex or just different things, make sure you're helping out. Make sure you're tending to her by saying, don't worry, babe, I got that. You rest, I will do this. I will bath the kids. I will clean up. I will do the dishes. One example, at the time she might put our daughter to bed, but I'm the one doing the dishes. I'm the one tidying up all the toys and everything else. But by the time she comes downstairs, it's all tidy. That's the result. I think in 2024, there's no excuse for a man. I guess in our generation, older generation are different. But there's no excuse for a man to sit and watch his missus do everything. I don't care if she's been at home with the kids and you've been at work all day. I don't care. As soon as you get home, your job is not to sit down and put your feet up and do nothing. Your job is to make sure, babe, are you okay? How was your day? Do you need me to do anything? Or if you see something, okay, let me just do this just to make her time easier. And what usually happens is you're probably going to see her knocked out very quickly because she's tired. So yeah, a lot of men need to become a bit more understanding, but a lot of women need to remember you still have a marriage to maintain after all of this. So tread carefully, although we understand it's a very delicate situation.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that as well, because I think that's a powerful lesson. Look, whilst I was on the streets, I told you I learned some things. Okay, now people didn't have kids, but I learned the power of being able to take the weight off a woman's shoulders, right? And take some of the weight off her hands. It's such a powerful thing, right? So a lot of men, we don't really understand it because we look at things from a very logical perspective. Like, if I can't see it in your hands, then what am I looking at? But the reality of the situation is the emotional drain that takes place when you are having to do house chores and cleaning and looking after kids, or even going to work and having to look after the baby after, or whatever. Do you know what I mean? If you put a child in creche or whatever, it's a lot, right? And that does a lot to the mind itself. As a man, we understand that, of course, it is taxing for us too going to work, right? Everybody wants everybody to understand. Everybody wants everybody to understand that. So the key part is, like I said, I want a result. So I'm gonna do whatever I need to do to get a result. I'm just saying the truth. If you want to clean, I'm gonna clean, because at the end of the day, I want the result. You know what I'm saying? I want intimacy and I want sex. So if that's what I want, I've got to be ready to do what needs to be done. If that means I have to come home, when I come home, I have to help out, clean, do whatever, I'm going to do it because I understand what it means for the other person, right? And sometimes I think, like, as men, I do feel like, and it's not all men, and it's not, I'm not even going to say, a lot of men, I'm just going to say there's a section of men that don't understand the game. You understand how to make money, but you don't understand the game. There's an emotional component that comes into relationships. And actually, it just shows that actually maybe you're not emotionally as connected as you thought you actually were if you're not deep in that your partner may be struggling and you're not paying attention, right? And vice versa, right? So we all got to have that conversation. So you're absolutely right, bro, in that situation where if I know that, if you know that, your missus has been with the child all day, maybe you might have to when you come home, you might have to take the child off her hands. Maybe the child might have to be resting on your shoulder while you're trying to read a paper at the same time. And then you start to realize and when you start to appreciate just how much work that your partner's actually doing, having a child or a baby, or having someone to look after as a dependent. I think that sometimes we are so distant and disassociated from having to do a lot of that work. Like, I'm a firstborn, innit? So I know exactly what it takes to look after the younger siblings. I know the energy it takes. I know the emotional toll it takes. I know how changing nappies, cleaning, feeding, going to distill a bottle, making sure that I turn around to make sure you're around if you're crawling or whatever. Your mind can't stop. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? So if I can take that burden off you so that you can finally rest for a little bit, it may be, you're right, you may knock out tonight. But you know what? By the end of the week, you might be appreciative of the fact, the effort I've made. And again, if the person doesn't see that, you may need to have a conversation and say, hey, babe, look, you know what? I can't lie to you. I want a bit more us time. You know what I'm saying to you? I want to be able to, have a bit more intimacy, and, maybe we're having sex for a while. You know what I mean? I would love to, I want us to get back to that place, of having sex and being able to be intimate as well. But you got to be mature about that, right? You have a conversation. You don't just go and say she doesn't care about me, and then you go out there and you cheat and do some madness. So again, it's about really understanding the weight that your partner's under. If you feel like you're being, taken for granted, then let's present that case to our partner. Let's not just not communicate and then go outside. You know what I mean?
Wonderful, bro. And as you were speaking, I remember something as well. I guess from a more practical term on what that looks like for a man, because don't forget, we're still leaders of the home. So, we're going to be dictating that atmosphere. And so transparency, my first daughter's lived with me for the majority of her life. So I know what it's like to feel overwhelmed. I know what it's like to feel, it's only you really doing things. I know what it's like to feel that you need a break. And like you just mentioned, I know what it's like to feel, do you know what? If I think about these things, I'm going to be sad. It's going to be a struggle. So let me take these things out of my mind and just be autopilot and just get it done, and just get it done, just get it done. That's all you're focusing on. And I used that experience and I said to my ex-wife, way before she gave birth, excluding the weekends, because the weekends are the weekends, I want you to pick one day in the week where you just have time for yourself. That's what I want to give to you. Just have time for yourself. She picked Tuesdays. So she would leave in the mornings, and I'm still working, but obviously it's COVID, so, I'm working at home. But she would leave in the mornings, go for coffee, go gym, do whatever she wanted to do, and she might be back in the afternoon, or she might be back 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever she wanted to do. But I was adamant that she gave herself that time. And let's be honest, even for me as a man to be able to do that, I wanted her to appreciate, oh, wow, my man he understands, he wants to give me that time. And that was her first child as well. So it's not like she had experience beforehand, but at least her first experience, amongst everything else that was going on, I wanted her to not forget who she was as a person and just able to spend that time. On the weekends, on a Saturday, I would usually say to her, don't worry about Saturday mornings. That's me. I got you. So she would usually take over. Let's say we put her to sleep around 12. She would wake up around 2. That's when my ex-wife would take over. And at that point, I might go and do the garden. I might go shopping. I might even go gym. Sometimes I might even still just be sitting there. We're just enjoying whatever we're doing together. So that's how it looks in practical terms, in terms of what things you can actually do. Something that Naomi said, and this is something I'm hearing a lot more about these days, and I get why. But men criticizing a woman's body during, I guess, that whole process. All I can say is, men, stop. Just stop. That's ridiculous. This lady has given you the gift of giving birth to your child, and I know in this day and age, sex and pregnancy has been, it's like drinking water. It's people don't care. They just don't really care about who they have kids with or who they have sex with. But ultimately, this is your babes. Again, mature conversation. This is your babe. She's giving you the gift. Criticizing her body is not going to help anything. If she wants to put in the effort to change, because there is a lot of women who generally say, no, I need to snap back. My ex-wife, during the pregnancy, she said, I'm not going to overeat. As soon as I give birth, I'm on it. And so after 2 weeks, that's what she did. I didn't have to say anything. But what I was never going to do was to criticize how she looked. I was never going to, talk about stretch marks negatively. I was never going to say things like, oh, I preferred how you looked before. I was never going to do that. What I wanted to help with the confidence that she had, because again, mentally and emotionally, sometimes a lot of guys don't understand what is going on with a woman. And at the same time, maybe the opposite can happen, like Kiki Palmer, where that baby weight can do wonders for you. But as a man, you appreciate it. You say, babe, you're beautiful. You do what you're supposed to do, but make it genuine. But yeah, just don't be that guy. Don't be the guy. And I know there's a lot of men who are like that, but don't be that guy. Because all the complaints that you have, you're not helping by, in her most vulnerable moment, you're criticizing, you're putting her down. You're crazy for that.
Yep, I definitely hear that, bro. Definitely. I think there's a time and a season for that, and that's probably not the time and season for that. See what I'm saying to you? You know what I mean? I think everything has timing. So, you know what I mean? I think if you want someone to be in a certain shape, everything has timing. You know what I mean? Choose your timing wisely. It's probably not going to be the best time to do it when you just had birth. Just going to tell you that now. It's not the best time. Okay,
Always,
let's
bro. Have
yeah?
that conversation beforehand, just about what do you want after birth to look like. We can go gym together, or do you want that time where I look after my child? Do you want to go have that conversation? So at least once that happens, you've already set the ground rules. In fact, let me not say it that way. You've already set some of the parameters, um, or the boundaries. And I'm saying it that way differently because I don't want it to seem like it's coming from a man. She might say to you, no, I need this time so I can rebuild myself, so I can look the way I need to, so I can instill the confidence that I need to. Cool. I want to give you that, babe. And that's it.
Definitely hear that as well. Do you know what I mean? That's another conversation for another day because I know the ladies are going to take that to heart. So that's another conversation for another day. But no, okay. Let's talk a little bit about then. Okay, what does a conversation with your partner look like when you want your needs being met? So you're a man. You're probably listening to this thing to yourself. Yeah, these men are talking, but they're not even talking about how a man's going to do it because that's what most men want to focus on. How am I going to do it? How am I going to get my needs met? So let's help them a little bit. How are we going to approach this conversation? How are we going to approach a conversation with the missus, the wife or the girlfriend or partner, where you feel like your needs are not being met? How do I address it then? You know what I'm saying? To maybe a partner's complaining about the way they address certain things. So how does one address a partner when you want to get the needs met? Jay, talk to me.
I mean, I'll say this for the third time because it's probably the most important to me. From beforehand, you need to be building that foundation to be able to have these conversations safely. And that means you both need to create a safe space to be able to address these things. You also need to talk about, again, what life is going to be like afterwards. That should be a standard. Why? Because now you have an expectation. There should be flexibility, but now you have an expectation, something to work with. Now you're in a situation, the person is not doing what you expect or is falling short or whatever. You need to decide, is this a problem? You need to think about what is going on with that person, what is going on with you. And if you have, I know we're human beings, but if you have set those foundations beforehand, you should be okay to just communicate. Also, whichever party it is, you should be okay to receive as well. That's the main thing. Just say it. You don't say it in an argument. We're human beings. It's probably going to happen. But try not to say it in an argument. Try not to say it with venom. Try not to say it by putting the person down. Just communicate. Babe, this is what I need from you. And this is not what's happening. The next thing I know, or the next thing I'll say, sorry, is to preempt. Again, it's 2024. There's no excuse. We should be able to have foresight to think about, okay, what does that person need? So as we mentioned, if we see that our missus is tired, we need to say, okay, what can I pick up around the house to give her that time, to give her that space? What do I need to do? Do I need to arrange childcare so we can go out on a date and just do certain things, like you said, bro, a holiday? Do I need to maybe arrange a date in the house? Do I, depending on what her love language is, do I need to, let's say, give her a gift as an appreciation, or what can I show as an appreciation? And I think on the ladies' side as well, do the same thing for your man. Now, you know what type of man you married, you know what type of marriage that you've kind of built. And I'm saying it that way because if you have a man who's really helping you, also show appreciation. If you have a man who's not helping you, it's going to be very difficult to show appreciation. However, that's a conversation that you need to have way beforehand. 'Cause some men have literally been trained just to sit there and it's a woman's job to do everything. So, so again, it goes back to communication. But whilst you're in a situation and you have a man that's really helping you, a lot of men are different now. I know we have, a lot of guys who are not responsible, don't want to look after their child, and we're not addressing those guys right now. We're addressing guys who are willing to do their part, who are there to show appreciation. show appreciation and a willingness to, just to say thank you in whichever way. Saying thank you is going to be the best. That's really what I'll say. That's really what I'll say, because I don't look at it as complicated. I look at it as generally simple. What makes it complicated is whether you haven't had conversations beforehand, or where you've allowed your emotions to create a very negative atmosphere where it does make it hard to talk or to address things. The worst I have seen is where a couple could only talk by text. One was upstairs, one was downstairs. That was the only way they could talk. And some people may say, well, what kind of crazy is that? I mean, they're still married, they're thriving, they're happy. That was just the way that they chose to be able to, say how they feel about what was going on. And yeah, that's what I'll say.
Yeah, listen, I think if you're gonna, great points there, Jay. I think if you're gonna have a difficult conversation, there are some rules of engagement I would like to just bring to your table, to attention. Let me go to my my rules of engagement. I wrote some down about how to address a conversation which is very difficult, because these conversations are difficult. Now, the first things first here is to accept any responsibility that you have not accepted already. Okay, first things first, accept any responsibility that you have not accepted already, which means, like I said, Jay, if you know that you're not picking up around the house, I need you to admit it and confess it now. If you know that you're not really engaged with the baby and you're letting her do much of the work, I need you to confess it now. If you know that you come home late from work and you spend an extra 10 minutes, 15 minutes and you haven't really spoke to her, and maybe she wanted to speak to you, whatever you feel like you're not doing correctly, this is the time to admit. You need to disarm your partner quickly. Okay, so admit any type of responsibility or fault that's on your path. This is going to disengage and disarm the person's defenses straight away when they see that you are also taking some responsibility. I know it sucks, but it is what it is. It's the truth. The second thing I like to say is, what do you want to see? Set a goal for the conversation, right? So what is it we're looking to achieve from this conversation? Like, look, I'm looking to achieve some understanding here, right? I want my needs to be met, but I don't want it to be met at the expense of, our relationship, or at the expense of your mental health. You know what I'm saying to you? And so, you set some goals and parameters in that space and say, hey, look, the end goal is I want us to have some understanding here. You know what I mean? I want us to be able to be on the same page, have the same understanding going forward, okay? And then sometimes, if you haven't really done this already, which you should have done way before this time, it's also rules of engagement, right? So, for instance, you might say, listen, it's a very difficult conversation. Can I just finish all my points before you interrupt? Or, when you're talking, I'm not going to interrupt. I'm going to let you finish. Or I might ask some questions at the end. I might ask questions that are going to qualify it, but not take away from the conversation, right? So if I'm asking a question, it's not necessarily to say I'm challenging. It more is I'm asking questions for you to qualify and explain further. Right, so that might be a rules of engagement. Another aspect is also to validate all feelings. I know this one is a tough one for men, especially. Okay, and sometimes it can be tough for women too. Actually, it's just saying it for both people. If you're not very well versed, this, validate feelings. Let me give an example. Someone might say, "I can't lie to you. You know what? The way you don't pick up the socks, the way that you don't pick up your socks, it frustrates the heck out of me." And your first instance to say, but how are you talking about my socks when your toothbrush is on the side? Now, I get it. You're right. The toothbrush is on the side. How can they talk? You're absolutely right. But I need you to validate the feelings first. Right? You can still bring up the toothbrush point, but you need to validate the feelings in that immediate moment. Say, look, I really hear you. I can understand why my socks on the floor can be frustrating for you. That's it. Validate the feeling. Don't do anything else. You got to validate feelings, my guy, okay? Otherwise, people feel like they're not being heard and they're not being seen. And I'm telling you, when you begin to start talking about how you want something more, you'll realize that the access is denied. You know what I'm saying to you? So there are rules that we engage in before we get to our conversation, right? And the last point is, let them go first. You have the issue, but let them go first. Because then they can get any gripe off their chest off. Right? Let them get their gripe off their chest first. Let it come off, right? Before you address your issues. And you make sure that person is finished. Have you finished? Have we addressed all issues? Do you feel like I've heard and seen you? Yes, fantastic. Okay, here are my issues too. Okay? And that's it. And what ends up happening, again, because you're trying to get understanding and not win, right? You have a better chance of your needs actually being heard, understood, and actually being met later on. Because like I said, there may be things in between that. There may be things in between that I didn't realize I wasn't doing, or things that you actually need from me, and I need to actually start doing, right? It may be like maybe I'm doing a lot around the house already, but maybe for you, what you really need is you actually all you actually needed from me was to wash dishes, but I'm doing everything else. And you're like, I don't need to do everything else. I need to wash dishes. So it gives opportunity of the other party just to be able to say what they're saying, okay? And I always say as well, just be careful what words you use. I'm a stickler for this one because I'm bad at this. I'll be saying some words that definitely trigger some points. You know what I mean? I'll be like, that's dumb. Don't do that. You know what I mean? Don't like, oh, you're crazy. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Don't choose words that are going to intentionally become fighting words, because it makes you lose. And because overall what you want is you want unity and you want connection. And when you've done a great job, can I tell you when you've done a great job? You will know when you've done a great job when you leave that conversation and people are saying, do you know what? That was painful, but I really do see your point, right? Or I really hear you. Or do you know what? You know what? I didn't understand. I mean, I understood it, but I don't fully grasp it yet. But thank you for sharing. I'm going to take it away. I'm going to process it. Then you know the person's actually really heard you. Do you know what I'm saying to you? Right? But when people are leaving a huff and a puff, then you know we haven't done our job properly well. Because at that point, all that's happening is that people are frustrated. And my last point is this. When people get frustrated, you may need to leave that conversation alone for now. You may just need to park the bus and say, listen, babe, I can see you're getting a little bit intense right now. I don't think it's going to be productive for us to have a conversation. So let me leave it there. Okay, let me just leave that point there. Let's address this tomorrow. Okay, we'll address it for tomorrow. We'll ring fence sometime. Someone said to me the word ring fence. I love the word. They said ring fence sometime, maybe half an hour. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Yeah, because I can see it's getting a little bit heated, and I don't want to lose you at this point. I don't want you to lose me at this point in terms of getting triggered and saying something I shouldn't say. Let's ring fence it for another time. Your partner may not like it at first because all of us are growing and trying. Sometimes people don't like maturity, but they will have to surrender to that point. Okay, so just as my few points there as well. Go for it, Jay.
Amazing, bro. Like you're saying the things exactly how it should be. I was talking to my mentee today because he had an argument with his missus a couple of days ago, and they're in their early 20s. They're looking to get married soon. They're looking to get married soon. And one of the things I said to him is the sweet spot is where you both can share how you feel. It might get a little bit heated. That's okay. No panic. And be okay doing that, listening to each other, and be able to say, okay, I'm sorry. I acknowledge, like you're saying, this is where I've gone wrong. You're both being able to do that in the same moment and be able to move on, laugh and joke, and maybe immediately, maybe an hour, maybe the same day. And I gave him an example of, me and my missus. We had I'll say it was a heated argument a couple of days ago where, it was strong, very strong. But one of the things that she would even say, she was to get here and speak, is saying that who she was 2 years ago in the beginning or throughout her life is not the type of person that would have been able to have that type of argument and be okay afterwards. And the reason why we got there is because I said to her from the very beginning, if we want to be healthy, we need to be able to have a healthy argument and still love on each other afterwards. A lot of people argue and take away that love, and we get it. That's usually because of trauma, childhood trauma. It's something that most people are working out. We get it. It takes time, but that's the sweet spot. But if you can't get there, then like Kojo was saying, I said to him, then you're gonna have to accept, even when you really want to come back and say something that's fantastical, say something that's like, I've been waiting, which is bad anyway, you need to park it for another day. That's the two aspects, because your mindset should be, like Coach said in the beginning, what do you want from this conversation? Do you just want argument, or do you want the betterment of your relationship or marriage? And before I came home, I was talking to one of my friends who's been married for almost 30 years. And there's one thing that he said to me over 10 years ago. One is argue fairly, but two is when you are just focusing on, he used the term plussing yourself so you can feel what you need to feel, you're always going to minus that person and minus the relationship. Your aim in whatever you're expressing, and again, it's a work in progress. We all come from places that most likely didn't do this, but Your aim to express should be, once we finish the argument, once we finish the issue, we should come out on the other side adding more brick to our foundation and say, babe, we made it. It was beautiful. This is where I am now in my relationship, where we even laughed and joked about it. Like, wow, this is amazing that we're able to do this and move on, despite the things that were said and whatnot. And regardless of your situation, this is the way to go. So I'm speaking to my men. Build an atmosphere, a safe place for your relationship where this is what happens. It may not happen straight away, but eventually build that safe space where it can happen. I'm speaking to my sisters, to the ladies. We understand, yeah? Sometimes you might feel men can be so frustrating. You might be used to just saying things how you want, saying things anyhow, because in your mind, you're just expressing how you feel. Always be very careful, just like the men, and understanding the impact of how you are saying things. What you're saying, depending if you're someone who's quite venomous with what you say and certain words you use, but how you are saying things, again, what do we want from this situation? What do we want from this debate or argument? Because ultimately, we still want to love each other. We still want to look at each other in the face. We still want to do what we need to do. We still have a marriage or relationship to maintain. And, you know, the question is, are we at a place where we're able to do it? So this is where I go back to conversation, the communication around not only what do we want, what foundations we are building, but also who are we? Generally, who are we? And from there, it should tell you all you need to know.
I love that, man. I love those points as well, because I think, again, you know, and I want, you know, just for any man out there as well, your needs can be met in these conversations. I want you to understand it takes a lot. And this is where your leadership is actually really tested. I think just over the past few months, I've had some difficult conversations with different people, because expressing your needs to people is very difficult, right? And one of the hardest things, and if any man out there, I'm sure, is going to be defensiveness, right? So like, if you say something and it doesn't come back the way you thought it was going to come back, or, you know, as you said something, the person cuts across you and interrupts, or the person's actually not listening, or they get, I like to call it convenient amnesia, that women like to have. Women like to have convenient amnesia. They'll be like, what? I don't remember that. What? And you be like, no, remember I told you. No, what? And suddenly, you know, and you feel it in your chest, you feel it rising. Okay, yeah, that form of defensiveness is a real thing, right? So that real defensiveness that can come out. And I want to let you know, listen, the way to combat that defensiveness that you feel inside of yourself really is actually to mention it. Is actually describe what's actually happening to you. Once you describe what's actually happening to you, it actually starts to die down. So if you feel yourself being defensive, don't try to contain it and be like, you know, and then before you know you're doing passive aggressive, just be honest. Listen, hey, look, I can't lie to you. I'm feeling a little bit defensive. What you said, you know, I'm feeling a little bit defensive about what you just said just now, right? What that actually does is it brings attention to it, brings awareness to it, and it brings you back into your body. Because what's actually happening is a lot of times we are acting on a subconscious level, not on the conscious. See, you don't have control when you're on a subconscious level. So you need to be able to control what's happening. So you need to bring that thing to a conscious level. Because what's happening is, once you got defensive, your mind subconsciously said about 400 or 500 different things. Oh, she's this, she's that, she's this, she's this. So your natural, just like a fighter, you ever seen a fighter that gets knocked out and still fighting after? It's a natural instinct that they have. So your natural instinct to fight is do. But you need to put that back into a conscious frame and be, actually, look, I can't lie to you, I'm feeling a little bit defensive right now. And that puts you back into the consciousness. Okay, bring that back to the consciousness. So I think, what are you actually saying? I'm trying to understand what you're saying, you know, and be intentional about that. Okay, your partner may also be defensive, right? And if that is the case, mention it. Say, hey, look, it feels like you've been a little bit defensive. Am I correct? You know, what's actually happening for you? And what that does, it brings them back into the consciousness as well, rather than going on an attack and just firing the person because you want to get your win on. You know, nobody wins when the family feuds. Do you get what I'm saying to you? So we want to make sure that's actually happening. And number two, also learn the woman that you're actually with, because men and women have their own narratives, right? So you have to understand that when an argument's going on or a disagreement's going on, people have narratives. Somebody thinks that, you know what, you don't care about them. Somebody thinks that, you know, you don't love them. Somebody thinks that, you know what, he's always angry. So they have different types of narratives. Learn your woman. The Bible says, dwell with women according to knowledge. So as the leader of that conversation, look, I always say this, as a man, I want to chair most of the conversations that I have. Whether I'm the right or wrong, I want to chair it. Reason being is because then I can actually effectively make sure that we are guiding and steering this conversation in the right direction. Number two, also as well, because I believe that I'm called to leadership. So whether I'm right or wrong, I got to chair the conversation. Whether I like it or not, I gotta chair the conversation. You know what I'm saying to you? And so just be aware of that. Your partner, especially your woman, will really appreciate those things, that when you're chairing conversations, that you know what, you're able to maintain your cool. Because let me tell you this now, women know how to press some buttons. Oh, they know how to press some buttons, right? And they see a button and they're like, their eye starts twitching and they realize, I'm gonna press it one more time to see what he does. Like, I'm being facetious, but what I'm saying is, there will be buttons that we press, but you gotta learn. Just like Jesus said, the son of the Prince of Peace cometh, but he has nothing in me. You almost have to get to a place where you're dead to those things, so that you don't react in those situations, right? I don't want to get you hyped. Personally, I don't. I think when I was insecure and I was more toxic, yes, because I wanted to prove a point, or I wanted to win, or I wanted you to care about me more, rather than actually going, no, this is not stewarding the conversation. When I see you getting hyped, I don't want to do anything that's going to get you hyped. I want to bring you back into the place so we can actually steer this conversation in the right direction. I want to be heard, because let me tell you this now. The moment someone gets infuriated, they forget what you actually said, and all they remember is how they felt. So even the points you were making that were hitting, when next week when you discuss it again or discuss something else, they'll be like, I don't even remember what you said. Yeah, because we was hot. You know what I'm saying to you? So we don't want that for the person. Yeah. Last few points.
Amazing, my bro. What I'm gonna say addresses everyone, but the example's a woman, but I'm gonna address everyone because of that defensiveness, right, or the uncomfortability. I remember I went to a live podcast a couple years ago, and there was people on the panel. Certain things that some ladies were saying and some men were saying were addressing some truths when it came to women and whatnot. And I could see in the crowd, some women were at an emotional place where they can say, okay, yeah, that's true. And some just didn't like it. Now, I remember a particular man, he said something that was actually quite normally true, to be honest with you. But what I noticed there, which is something that I noticed in general, is that there was a lot of ladies who disagreed, but didn't even know why they disagreed. They didn't know why. They just said, I disagree. And I'm using that as an example is because now I realize the issue wasn't really what the man said or even how he said it. It was the fact that on the inside, what he said didn't make those people feel comfortable. It elicited some sort of feeling that they just didn't want to be in that place, didn't want it to be addressed. So what they had become used to was fighting or attacking what's creating that feeling, instead of actually saying, why do I feel this way? It doesn't mean because I feel this way, I'm right? It's just why. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It's why do I feel this way? What's going on inside of me? And this is what Kojo's trying to address. Like, oh, I feel a bit defensive. I still fall for that myself. Oh, why the person's not wrong, but oh, why? Oh, what's? It's better to do that, to have that self-reflection, than to just because you end up sabotaging your relationship. So look within and figure out, why do you feel this way? If the person's not wrong, why are you fighting them? And also, if you are right, give that person grace. Don't keep, because you're right, you keep battering them. But yeah, so this is something that happens a lot. Usually there's a lot of trauma going on that started way before you came along, which has created this type of environment or the way that they emotionally deal with things. But as you move forward, once you're able to share this and talk about this, you'll realize how much more healthier your relationship is in dealing with conflict and addressing certain things. Because some people don't want to admit that because they feel vulnerable. Some people don't feel comfortable to admit that because they don't want to put themselves in a position where they do feel exposed, or feel like that other party. Let's be honest, some people don't like the other party being right. For whatever reason, they just don't like that. So these are all things that you have to contend with in dealing with conflict and, everything great. Yeah, and just like Kindness said, yeah, things that sound good doesn't make it nice, and just because it sounds bad, it doesn't make it a bad thing. So sometimes, yeah, how we internalize is really what the problem is. But I'll also say this, don't allow that to be a manipulation point as well, because there are some things that are just bad. There are some things that are just good. So we have to at least get to a point where we're mature enough to be able to discern. It's going to be difficult, but we're able to discern what's what. Ultimately, it's just a conversation that we need to have. And after the conversation, you can have a debrief, you can look back and say, okay, where did we go wrong? Where did we go right? But it's just, as you mentioned, understanding each other. I think the greatest thing that I chose to do was to understand my missus and how she is. Doesn't mean I agree with everything. No. It doesn't mean that I respond in the best way to things that she does. No. And vice versa. But understanding who she is and how she is has helped me to talk about things, has helped, me as the leader of the relationship, for her to get to a better place alongside other things she was doing and God as well in her life, to be able to be different in how she dealt with certain things, which then forces me to look at myself and say, well, I need to do the same thing. How do I become a better leader? How do I become someone who addresses these things better? And yeah, that's just how it goes.
Yeah, and as a final point, you're absolutely right, bro. I think the key part here as well, like I said, you want to know how to engage your partner. Just be smart about it, man. Know how to engage. You can discuss this before you even get into these kind of situations. Like, how do you want us to handle conflict? You know what I mean? Because some people need more. Some people might appreciate the sandwich method, where some people actually really just appreciate you just being direct. Like, don't bat around the bush. You need to know what works for your partner, and what works for you as well, right? Because what works for your partner means it's going to work for you. So you got to be aware of what's going to work for you. Me personally, I don't like being fully critiqued all the way through and there's no encouragement. It makes me feel like it ain't going to work. And I know that other people feel the same way too, but not everyone feels that way. Some people like a direct approach. So again, it's about learning things. I remember I got told that maybe it's the way you say certain things, coach. I'm like, well, how do I say things? And I remember I got defensive. I was like, what do you mean? I take my time with it, but but how they are receiving it, irrespective, I got to maybe look at it, right? Because they want to receive what I'm saying. They're not saying they don't want to receive it. They're saying I want to receive it, but the way you're saying that I can't, it's hard to receive. All right, cool. Then I need to change. You know what I mean? Again, these are the conversations we need to be having so that we ourselves and our partner are going to be understood. And that is literally the end point of the goal is we want to be understood. The win is when we both win by understanding of each other. We don't win when I win and you lose, or you win and I lose. That is not a win in a relationship. Trust me, people build up resentment that way. Okay, so it is important to understand that point of view, for people. So yeah.
Do you know what? On that as well, bro. I was thinking that we love talking about love languages in a way that, okay, how do I cater towards you? How do I make you feel everything that you need to by catering towards your love language? It's 2024, so I'm sure it's online somewhere, but there needs to be an argument language or argument love language or whatever out there as well. And that's effectively what we do. That's effectively what we're saying. It's, all right, even though someone might feel in that moment how they are saying things is okay, but if that person is not receiving it, then you need to revisit it, and figure out what is that? How can I convey myself so that this person actually receives it? Or rather, what are they asking for? And that's a job for everyone. But we're going to speak to us as men. As the leader of the household or leader, this is what leaders anywhere have to do. They have to figure out, how do I get the best out of what I need to say to this person that I'm leading? How do I get the best out of them? If I'm speaking and it's not landing, then yeah, I need to really look at how I'm saying things. It doesn't matter if I feel the way I'm saying things is okay. How do I say things for the best effect? Because ultimately, I want the whole house to thrive. I want the ship to get to its destination. We all want the plane to land. And, that's really what we're saying. Yes, it is difficult. We're all coming with our own fight, our own anger, our own, shield and spear. But this is where healing and learning how to fight fairly, this is where it comes into it. A lot of us are used to toxic relationships, toxic upbringings, toxic environments, communities, and how these things are dealt with. What we've been saying here is a perspective to have and how to have a more healthier conclusion in getting there.
Absolutely. Well, listen, our time is up, guys. Listen, we're going to bounce off real quick. I want to make it before the hour mark. But I appreciate you guys who've joined us today. This is the kind of stuff that we like to talk about every Thursday. So make sure you join us next week. For the same time, we're going to talk about another particular topic around about men and their issues that we are facing right now in relationships. Make sure you like, share, subscribe, click on the bell button for notification of uploads. We appreciate you guys. Stay locked and stay loaded. We'll see you again very, very soon. Much love, much appreciated.